Welcome to the iPad Possibilities Podcast, episode number 10, the Indy Dev Team. Well, welcome, and this is the iPad Possibilities Podcast. I'm Tim, and I'm your host of the show, and for this week, I had a great opportunity to meet with the Indy Dev Team, basically the development community in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we actually discussed the possibilities of the iPad and what it means for us as users. So for this episode, it's about 30 minutes long worth of content from that, and we discussed other things, but I pulled out all of the things that we discussed and basically concentrate on what's relevant for this podcast, and that is the possibilities of this device. I took out all the coding and SDK talk because it gets a little geeky in there, and I thought I'd concentrate on just the 30 minutes of pure roundtable discussion on the possibilities of the iPad. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. I do have to excuse myself for the mic I'm using is not my normal mic. It's not my typical setup, and it may sound a bit worse for this intro material, so I just want to apologize for that. And I would like to let everyone know, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by purchasing the iPad Possibilities Podcast app. It's found in the App Store for $2.99. And what you get with that app is easy access to the show and early access to the show. You get the shows 24 hours in advance on Monday and Wednesday instead of Tuesday and Thursday. So get it now in the App Store for $2.99. Also, I'd like to let everyone know that I've gotten feedback about the live shows, and I've heard back that the audio between me and Ryan is not pleasant when you're wearing headphones, having one in each channel. So in the future, I'll have that all in one channel, so it won't be as obnoxious for you people that are listening on the headphones. So I'll be doing that in the future. And as always, send your feedback. It really helps me improve the show and make it better. Send that feedback to iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. And I always appreciate reviews in iTunes, so if you can send those in as well. And I've also got feedback on future shows and what you guys like to have covered. And I'll be doing some shows on those requests that you guys have sent in via voicemail and email. So keep sending that in and keep bringing new ideas to the table on about what I can cover and what you're interested in. I want to really gear this show towards you, towards the audience of the show, because everything around the iPad and the possibilities really interests me. And I'm actually going to start covering applications that pertain to the iPad, and we'll be having an app section every week on the live show and different things like that. So the show will be getting tweaked, and it'd be a great help to me if you could send me in your feedback as to what you'd like to see tweaked with this show on how to improve it. So once again, just send your feedback to iPadPossibilities@gmail.com and at the voicemail line, which you'll be able to find that number in the show notes or at thepossibilitiesnetwork.com. So now I'd like to move right ahead to the main content of this show, and that is the discussion I had with the Indie Dev Team. And the Indie Dev Team is a group of iPhone developers in Indianapolis, Indiana, and kind of throughout the state. And we met last week for 2 hours to discuss the iPad and developing for it and different things like that. But the section I included here, the section that I thought you guys would be actually interested in listening to, was our 30-minute discussion on the possibilities of the iPad and the potential of the device, who the device is geared towards, and kind of that discussion. The rest of it, the other 90 minutes, really got into some really geeky, really technical stuff that I really don't think the majority of listeners would appreciate listening to. A lot of it I did not actually understand, being very new into iPhone development. So I just brought you the possibilities section of it. And I do have to apologize once again for the audio of this portion. I did record it using my Yeti Blue microphone, which is a great mic, and it's a mic I typically use on a weekly basis to record the shows, but it is a very open room. There are a lot of people talking, so the audio is quite listenable. It's quite good, but it is going to be a lower quality from what you're used to. For that, I apologize. And if you'd like to find out some more information on the Indy Dev team, you can find them at indyiPhoneDev.ning.com for some more information on them. And without further ado, I bring you the iPhone Indy Dev team discussion.
So, I don't know how much detail. I'm sure you've all read the press release. You know the details of the iPad. The hardware is a custom Apple chip, right? The A4, which is it's a system on a chip.
Yeah.
It's all one deal. All reports say that it's far faster than the current models of iPads and iPhones. So iPods.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I guess for one thing, what do you think, what do you think some of the possibilities are that are opened up by having, faster hardware, more screen real estate to work with? What comes to mind? I guess one for me, you can actually read.
Right.
Yeah. So that seems like a natural one to me, because I've got the Indy Star app and the New York Times app. It's all right, thumb through that, but I wouldn't want to spend more than a few minutes at a time reading on it. So that's one that sort of comes to mind.
And
right?
of course, that's definitely one thing they've targeted.
Oh yeah.
Evan Dahl, maybe I could get a show of hands. How many people have looked at Evan Dahl's presentation for the Stanford course?
The iPad presentation.
Yeah, the iPad.
Tell us about
that all?
For the iPad?
Yeah. Well, he gives his thoughts about what's different about the iPad. Why it isn't just a big iPod Touch, which I found very interesting. And in fact, I brought along a copy if you want to. And it runs about half an hour, so I don't know whether we want to devote that much time to it. But
we can just get the address.
His jumping off point is, I guess, a conversation between Steve Jobs and Alan Kay at the presentation, the initial unveiling of the iPhone. Jobs asked Kay, "So what do you think? Isn't it great?" And Kay said something like, "Make it a 7:9 screen," and or maybe it was 6:9, and it'll rule the world. So that's about what this is. So that made a good jumping off point for him. He said number one, make yourself an iPad and carry it around with you. Play around with it during the day. I wish I could give you a good summary, but I can't.
That's one of my questions, is whether, it's still a price point that I'll stick this in my, see I'll drop it and I'm okay with it. I'll stick it in my pocket or whatever. You get a little bigger device, and I'm just curious how portable it really will be.
Yeah, well, you'll certainly be able to carry it around, but you won't be able to stick it in your pocket.
Unless you have...
But because of that, right, am I going to take it everywhere with me?
That's a good question.
Depends on the person. I've got a coat that has a huge pocket, and, you can put an iPad in there. Yeah, it's a Sky vest. So.
They have that iPad spot.
So, yeah. And I think if you're carrying around a laptop, this will be lighter than a laptop. So, it's still portable if,
But I think the question, most of the people will not be able to rely on just iPad.
Right.
So, there's a question, will you be carrying an additional iPad?
Right.
I think it depends on how you'll use it.
Yeah,
That's why that's one thing that bothered me was I thought maybe before they actually announced it that they would not make it an oversized iPod, which I still think it is, versus an oversized iPhone. Because if they had Bluetooth connectivity on a headset and put the phone circuitry in there, then you could run it off of 3G, you wouldn't need Wi-Fi, you could use it as a substitute for an iPhone, and then you'd be more motivated to carry it around because you wouldn't have to carry two things around.
Right.
Right.
But they didn't.
And of course, there will be a
Yes.
3G version. However, it is not, and I'm not sure how they're going to enforce this, but it is not intended exactly as a phone. On the other hand,
They're now allowing
apparently
VoIP.
so on
Yeah,
Google.
they're now allowing VoIP
Yeah.
applications on the iPhone, so.
Yeah, you could
certainly do.
that's one way you could do it.
And one cool thing I was writing down a show on, could you podcast from an iPad, like create a show, do an interview over Skype and record that interview on the iPad? And with Google Voice, you're actually able to record conversations if you have Skype hooked up to Google Voice. So if you're a podcaster, you could actually do a Skype interview on the iPad, record it. You could have an app that can download stuff from Safari, which has been shown off that 3.2 will be able to do. And you can have a full-fledged podcasting studio on the iPad if you wanted to, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Now, how would you, is a microphone built in? I guess I don't know.
Yes.
There's a mic built in, and then
And speakers.
the regular headset or whatever.
Right, you can plug in the regular headsets that work with the iPhone.
Yeah,
by the time.
right. Video camera eventually, or some sort of camera.
There's no camera.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they didn't throw in an eyesight camera.
Yeah, it's very interesting that they didn't, and there are rumors that they will eventually.
More than rumors, there's actually,
In the hard-
in the break apart of people.
But isn't that part of their model, how they price up a little bit? I mean, isn't that?
But even the iPod Nano has a video camera.
The
Yeah.
space for the camera's in the frame. It's already
Right.
in the frame. It's
Right.
broken out.
Like it is the current iPod Touches.
Right.
Or I think it's.
My question is, I don't know if I see it as a general purpose device. I'm not sure exactly, will it sit in the living room on the coffee table? Will it be used by people traveling, stored in their bag?
Well, I can tell
Sort
you,
of thing.
my family would use the heck out of one because right now we've got an old laptop that generally lays around the living room, and it's a big lunky. I hate it, and I'd much rather have an iPad sitting there. And of course they all want one. They all want an iPad to play around.
I think you'll have one at your bedside table at night to close down the day reading or whatever on it. I mean, browse the web.
Or an e-reader.
I've got a couple of thoughts that went through my head about the thing. One is that initially when I was thinking, it's a hard sell because the early adopters like us already have both a MacBook and the iPhone.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, the place in between, we've got too much overlap for us. But
Oh yeah, perfect.
on the other hand, there's all those people out there who aren't the early adopters, who typically are the ones, the early adopters are people that normal people look to for recommendations.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be able to recommend this because they're not going to.
I think it'll.
But it's going to be perfect for those people who aren't early adopters.
I think it'll be huge in the young children and really older people that
Right.
don't know how to use computers yet, because you don't have to really learn how to use a computer. You just
Right.
interact with stuff.
Right.
Chris,
I think that'll be
Chris,
perfect.
I plan on
Market.
carrying it in my purse and using it to download
Yeah.
my magazines and articles
Absolutely.
and newspapers. That's my plan.
Absolutely.
So the
Like, for
e-reader.
example, I think there is another advantage and a disadvantage. Like, I think this can be used to read books. I think the iBook will be a little big advantage, but there's another disadvantage. Like, they don't have the copyrights for except United States. So this might be a big advantage in the world because, like, if you think about iPhone, okay, they sell a lot of units in the United States, but their actual power is the foreign sales. So,
But didn't they have to go through? Didn't they have to go through the same process with the original iTunes store with music and everything? They had to kind of go country by country and negotiate all the
yeah,
deals.
but if you think about iPhone, the thing is they don't have to get it. So they have stores all over the world, right? So you can just go and pay and download applications. But here, you cannot read a book. So when you can't read a book, you can't get the leverage from the iBook, then some of the functionality will not work in the outside of the country.
So you're saying right now at launch they won't have iBook available in other countries because they haven't made
Yeah, for
deals.
example, iTunes, people still use iTunes. How people just go and install or load their MP3s that they didn't buy from the iTunes store.
Right.
So it's a really nice player. Everybody uses it, right? And outside of United States, there are a couple of countries that you can go and buy songs from iTunes because they don't have the the copyrights, anything like no agreements.
Right.
But for the iBook, like you can't use it at all. I think this is a big disadvantage.
Why can't you?
Yeah, why do you
Because
think you couldn't use
the
it?
sorry.
Why do you think it can't be used outside of the US?
Because you cannot buy books, so how would you use it? Just
Well, I have one.
Why do you think you couldn't buy books?
because they cannot sell. All the publishers in the United States and outside United States, every country has their own publishers. So you have to go and make a deal with them.
The same way, but it's the same process. Like I said, they had to go
For
through with
movies, especially movies and TV
Movies
shows.
and TV shows.
Those are still lagging.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
But
Except iBook, like iTunes, they had the same problem. But still, you will be able to use your iTunes with your MP3s. So everybody in the world is actually using up, the highest potential of their iPhones because you just go and put your MP3s and you are good to go. It doesn't matter where you buy them, from your local, music store, from your iTunes. But
I would think the music, I know a little bit about the book publishing industry. I don't know that much about the music publishing industry, but I would think that the music publishing would follow the same general idea of country by country licensing, and certainly iTunes is available internationally. And since this is an Apple gig, as opposed to being run by individual developers, they've got all the clout in the world, both to go to book publishers around the world and say, don't you want to put this content onto our international iPad? And then in the other direction, the publishers internationally saying, how do we get onto the iPad? So I don't see that as a big deal.
I think
But I think he makes a good point because a lot of people already had a library of CDs. You didn't have to buy it again. You just converted it into
Yeah.
MP3
It's a
and you can throw it on the device. I mean, you can't.
It's a problem.
I haven't seen a book scan.
Well, the one question is,
It's a problem if this can't run like one of the other book.
If it can run EPUB.
yeah.
It does.
Are you, the one question,
I know for a fact that it will support
Yeah,
Exactly, so I don't see this as a lot different.
That's the
than
analogy to
iTunes.
that's the analogy to MP3. Right?
well, will you be able to import EPUB is the real question into iTunes? That's the real question.
Exactly.
Because Steve Jobs said it syncs over your music, your movies. He didn't mention ebooks in the sync at all.
true.
So I have no idea if they'll do that.
I work for McGraw-Hill.
Yeah.
Right. I'm employed by McGraw-Hill, and I can say that's their plan for getting their books, all their books onto the iPad is to use the EPUB format. That's my understanding.
Now, is there a DRM built in with that?
Oh, it's-
So they can.
I believe so.
Fair
I
play.
believe
Like,
there is a DRM that can be applied to the EPUB format.
just like the
I'm not
apps.
clear. I'm totally
You know.
going off hearsay, third hand. But
I'm a little perturbed that, when many people first saw the demo, this Jones demo with the books, they said, oh, that's the classic book reader, I think it was. And
Right.
well, the guy who runs that little company said, no, it's not ours, it's just that Apple hired my entire team.
Oh, really?
Anything for it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, Delicious Library?
yeah.
Yeah, because it looks exactly like Delicious Library.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I think you got to assume that it was IP personally, because it's the same principle as Apple suing the Android vendors for the look for the.
I've heard that the bookstore app isn't going to be loaded by default.
No, you have to download it is what
So
it says.
I
Yeah.
think you could use Kindle's app or whoever.
Well, I'm sure you can run them side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless they've done totally ridiculous, you can.
But I think I found it interesting. It's not going to be loaded by default. So it's not.
Really?
I think it's because it took them so long to get the software stable they couldn't put them on by default. Is
Well,
my
it
theory.
may be, or it may be that
That's true. They don't entirely release the iPad
differences
to the
from
iPad.
country to country.
Yeah.
I'll bet it'll be on there when they release it. Unless somebody's heard it's supposed to.
They said in their press release, they said in their press release that it would be available for download through iTunes
Because that was
on the day of, on April 3rd.
that was the one incomplete part of the people demoed it after the keynote. That was the one app that wasn't complete at all. Like you could just
manufacturing issue when they have to.
Yeah,
load the software
maybe.
by default.
yeah.
And wherever they're making these things.
But I wonder also whether, as they roll out country by country, they're going to have to make changes in that application.
Not any more than iTunes app. I mean,
Yeah.
That's true.
Like for example, like the Amazon Kindle, you don't have a chance. Like it works in a couple of countries. they will have the same problem. But they are Apple, they might solve it. But I think
You can buy international Kindle, can't you?
yeah, but it's still like not in 80 or 90 countries.
Oh, it's not every-
That's what I'm trying to say. Like it is limited. Like some countries in Europe and US.
So you can't buy, how many, there are a lot of countries that you can't yet buy TV shows and movies in, right?
Right.
Yeah, lots of countries.
Yeah.
Because it's completely different copyright.
It's because all those industries learn the lessons of the
Also,
music
for
industry.
Yeah, you go to, for example, iTunes, Turkey, like, that's
Yeah.
what I'm doing. You just get the application, but you don't get music.
Right.
You don't even see it. It just launches it to
Really?
Yeah.
Does the Kindle have a hard keyboard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's a big problem. Anywhere time you have a hard keyboard, it's inherently non-international.
Yep.
That was
That's
one
true.
good argument that I read about soft keyboards, that, it's soft, you can load hundreds of languages into it.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's another thought I had about the iPad, and I'd like to get you guys' thought on this too. Lavyaz, we've gotten, kind of little bits of interest here and there from, and I think one of the other big areas that the iPad will be successful in that people aren't thinking about is vertical markets, vertical apps.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the places that
things like-
tablets are already successful.
I think it's going to be huge in the medical industry. It's going to be a monster in the
Mac practice is already.
Yeah.
For example, like we have, like in Turkey, we have contacted lots of people in hospitals, like
Yeah.
a year ago. So they were like, okay, this is really nice, but iPhone is too small.
Right.
With the announcement of this, we have at least 3 or 4 hospitals that contacts us and say, okay, like now, this device is
Right.
good enough. So I think,
I've actually thought about this because I know, I did an app for a doctor here in town, and I've thought about the issue of using this in a medical context, and should be wary of listening, taking Jobs propaganda too much to heart, because touch tablets have been around for many years. I mean, I have a Fujitsu that is years old now, but it's more capable than the iPod, than the iPad is going to be. One serious problem with this whole thing is that, sure, it's touch, but it's finger touch. You're not going to take notes on this thing. It doesn't have a stylus where you can take handwritten notes and sign your name on it for a prescription.
You could, though. You could through 2 ways. They've got the Pogo stylus, which isn't as good as a true stylus. But another way, you could do a hardware stylus plugs into the dock, so it only takes input from that stylus. And there's applications that convert text to handwriting, which are pretty good.
Yeah, just that there are Wacom enabled touch tablets that can only do that. I was going to say, as far as domination goes, PC industry isn't standing still either. HP's going to come up with their slate, which will probably be either competitively priced or undercut the price of this, and it will run Windows 7, and it will run Flash, and it will have, yada yada yada. So a real hard drive, it'll be open. You won't have to go through Apple's App Store to get things onto it. I'm not, it's a little bit devil's advocate because again, I'm an Apple member, but there are these practical considerations that are inconsiderable. I mean, if you're going to say you need an extra piece of hardware to plug into it, then it's no longer something you can get off the shelf and use.
Well, in vertical markets, you're going to need, I would assume you'd buy extra stuff anyway.
Then what's the rationale for using this rather than an HP slate?
Because doctors prefer the interface, or a lot of doctors just prefer to use Apple stuff.
It might be the better, like, because for those tablets with all these hard disks, Windows 7, how much is it? 3 hours, 4 hours? If this can go for 15 hours,
well, can it? I mean, we don't really know yet.
Depends what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah, for example, it saves time.
HP said 3 years ago that the slate would cost $1,500. Now they say with increase in battery technology and lower hardware and lower power systems. So I don't know what their quote is on the battery life, but I bet it's not over 4 hours.
So they're definitely going to have to get over that input hurdle. Depending on the usage that the doctors will have in the hospitals and everything. I mean, using it in a hospital setting seemed to be one of those specific applications of how they can use the iPad. That versus universal, like sort of people using it, I thought maybe more specific uses seem to be the most. I don't know.
In a
hospitals, what other specific targeted uses could there be?
In a hospital setting, most of the charting is done by the nurses, and a lot of it is check charting.
Right.
You just need a couple of places. Yeah, exactly. If you see the paper and you just go there and you check, then maybe you need to make an extra note because of something unusual, and then your signature.
Well, one interesting thing is you get handed a clipboard when you go to a hospital. Say now they just hand you an iPad that has all the forms, and once you're done with the forms, it's instantly in every database that the hospital uses.
See,
and then when you're done with it, you don't need magazines you don't need to spend money to update magazines. You just have an iPad that's all the entertainment you need while you're waiting, and then you just hand it back to them when you're ready to go in.
I think one thing that could argue pro the medical setting would be if the screen is easier to clean in an effective and efficient
Certainly
way.
easier to clean than a keyboard.
And then paper.
But, well, I mean, easier than, say, a PD tablet, if you're going to use it that way. I mean, I would certainly, I think I'd rather fill out a piece of relatively sterile paper than to touch a screen that's been touched by 500 sick people when in the hospital.
Yeah, but the plugs and everything, but, it's
I just don't know. I mean, to me, comparing this thing to every other tablet, Windows tablet PC that's existed before is a little like comparing the iPhone to every
Well, not
mobile phone
before.
that existed before.
Not before, I mean, apples and apples in terms of what's coming out.
Right. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing the new Windows Phone 7 series phones that come out. I think they're a terrible name, but I think it was good. They're
I want to see
doing the right
Apple
thing.
crush Microsoft. It's just that they need to be doing some things better. Like they should have used the Pixel Pi screen rather than some conventional screen. I don't know if anybody has seen the Pixel Pi screen, but there are competing tablets that are using that, and it's a combo. It's really modern technology. It's kind of like color e-ink combined with conventional screen. It's fully readable in sunlight, but it works like a regular computer monitor.
I assume the drawback to that is it doesn't react as fast. But
Not that I've heard, it's just a little more expensive.
One interesting vertical market I think would be interesting if car manufacturers would have an option to have a built-in iPad to the car itself as the entertainment for music and GPS. You could literally mount this in the dash, where the radio is, and just have an iPad in there with custom-built apps for the car. You could have, with electronics, you can get a readout of the car with the iPad and get the mechanics behind what's wrong with the car on the iPad with the application, or, have been Pandora and whatever.
No, I think would be cool. As you're talking about that.
Yeah.
I don't want to mount the iPad anywhere in my car. What I think would be cool, though, is to have a streaming media server that sits in your car that would stream to your kids' iPads in the back seat rather than having a mounted screen.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Anyway.
One of the places I totally see this thing fitting in perfectly is for like sales reps. People that go out to businesses, they do demos, they show people, you pull up video, you pull up charts, it could be a very impressive way to tell a story about a product.
It's great sharing.
The biggest problem, because we were really close to close some deals with sales rep with iPhone. The biggest problem is an iPhone, and this one does not fit in an enterprise IT structure. So, for example, they really want if you lose it, for them, they really want to lock it, or for pushing up the new versions of a software, they don't want to sales rep go drag and drop to iTunes and then with the provisioning file. They really don't want it. So I think this will have the same problem again, with all these sales reps and enterprises. Still, the IT doesn't have such a control on the device, so they don't like it. I think this is a big problem with Apple products.
Yeah, unfortunately, that argues for the Windows-based tablets, because they can be locked down exactly the same way as a laptop or desktop system. Not that that's a great thing, but in that context, that software's already there from Microsoft.
Chris, right?
Yeah.
You actually started the conversation with, why does this product exist? And I think in terms of we have to keep in mind, this product is not designed for anyone in this room.
Exactly.
They have no desire for this room to buy the product, and they'll happily have you buy it if they don't care about you.
Right.
Apple introduces this product for consumers who do not currently own a laptop, who have never bought a laptop, may not even own a desktop computer, or finally going to get a computer. That's the blue ocean for this product.
Right.
Yeah.
They're looking at audiences who've never had an interface with a computer besides maybe at work, and maybe not by choice. And that's what that first primary market's going to be for introducing to market penetration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you already went. I said that kind of sitting right in front of me.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must have.
No, that's perfectly fine. You're just different.
I'm validating your.
Yeah, exactly.
Your vision.
What I said was that they have a problem because there are no early adopters for this product. And it's because the early adopters already have a laptop.
Yeah,
There will be.
against that. It is really made for people in this room because these are the iPhone developers, which there are still going to be people.
You'll build it,
Let me
but
finish it out.
that's right, yep.
Okay?
Currently, the only reason I would buy this would be to develop one.
Exactly. I think that's the only reason.
Currently.
Yeah, but that's not the
people
point of the
buy it.
marketplace. You're
And so,
not-
as a consequence of us doing that, there might be some early adopters show up here.
But sure.
But the other real question that I have is, how many people in here have an iPhone? Does anybody not have one?
Got to.
None of them are the same. Not one of us has exactly the same set of apps.
Right.
Right.
Well,
That's one of the major differences of an iPhone between an iPhone versus any other mobile phone. Everybody customizes it, and it really is a unique thing. I mean, you asked what was different about an iPad than any other tablet. Well, there's already a base of 100,000 applications that will run on this thing that will make every one of the iPads ever sold custom again and unique.
It doesn't have better development.
I can't help but think that isn't the place that they're going to
I
go.
want to come back to that a little bit because I want to talk about how we approach developing the iPad. And because there's a lot of unique issues now. If you're trying, the issue of do you develop two separate products, an iPhone and iPad specific, or do you
just attack the difference in the architecture and
I think it really depends on the nature of your app. I mean, if there's a lot of parking out, you're not going to use this. I don't think this thing has GPS in it.
The 3G model does.
The 3G model does, the other does not.
Yeah.
But a couple other vertical markets real quick before we go off from that topic was, I think any kind of, anybody that's outside looking at schematics or drawings, outdoor settings or need to be on the go and looking at things, physical plant, construction, architects. We've got interest from all.
How well can it be read in sunlight?
That myself.
Go ahead.
How well can it be read in sunlight?
Just as well as the iPhone. I imagine better.
No, yeah.
That's why the Pixel Pi screen would have been better, because it can be read in full blazing sunlight.
2.0.
But I don't know.
We'll see.
That would definitely be a wait and see.
One thing I thought would be cool, as just a concept, everyone has iPhones, and you have this iPad, which is like you can share that screen because it's large enough for multiple people to see. So I could see a big use case being iPhones as input devices for the iPad with multiple people around it. Say with the board game, you have your private set of cards or Scrabble pieces.
I gotta write something.
That's been discussed.
Yeah, Evan Dahl mentions that.
Or like card
like a
games.
Dungeons and Dragons grid tiles on the iPad when
And
you're
you
all.
have your own private view on your
Right.
phone.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
use GameKit.
And you can do audio inputs that way or other
To the next
things,
Gen Con.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if another one of your vertical markets might be, education in some ways. I mean, that's a natural one. But if you're a kid going off to college and you could get, do you get a laptop? Or do you take a hard look at an iPad instead?
You get a laptop.
I think you get a laptop.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you already have a desktop.
You know what? If you've got a hard keyboard to type papers on.
I think you're looking at it the wrong way, though. This is not, I was just thinking this isn't for college students, but it might be for elementary and junior high students.
Yeah.
I think
Because one of the advantages of having it be the walled garden is that they can't download viruses and all that other crap on there, and whatever else they want to run. They pretty much are stuck with what mom and dad or school wants them to run on there almost. So, I mean,
School publishers have an opportunity to create workbooks, interactive material for education learning purposes for young children, where publishers are now shifting to be able to shift to interactive workbooks as opposed to paper workbooks.
Yeah.
To save thousands of dollars in printing, millions of dollars in printing.
I think for college kids that already have a desktop computer, which I think in this day of age a lot do, they might get an iPad and have their desktop computer, which is their. I think that will be pretty popular.
If this had a stylus to write, to take handwritten notes on, I'd have a clear use case for a person. Because that's what I use my Fujitsu for, getting a degree in biomedical engineering. But that I found it very, that the Fujitsu is this heavy thing, it's 7 years old. The lightness factor, if you could take it in, notes would be great. That would be the use case one way beyond.
Who mentioned the pogo stick?
Oh, I did.
I've never used that.
It works pretty well. The only downside is since if your hand's on the screen, it picks up those inputs, so sometimes it can run into problems if you're not careful where your fingers are at. If you're good enough to keep your fingers off the screen, it works really well.
What is it you're talking about?
Pogo stylus, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. It's basically a stylus for the iPhone, which makes it seem like your finger is a stylus. So I'm able to do handwriting stuff with, I've got what's it called? I've got an app, it's called, let's see, WritePad I use. And it works really well. It's just as good as the Newton as far as recognizing text, and it works well. I'm just excited when iPad comes out, I won't be cramped to this
What was
size screen.
When are we going to get folders for apps on the
Right.
We got so many.
Yeah, I was really hoping that something. Yeah, I was really hoping. Yeah, that
Yeah, I got a jailbreak for that stuff.
that the springboard would get a refresh in 3.2.
I think 4.0 will.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so. Because yeah, we need some.
I think it was cool how the dock rotates even, and the whole screen rotates when it can be a horizontal dock now, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're more than 11 pages of apps, though, there are alternatives. Without jailbreaking, you get another couple, 3 pages.
Yeah, because you can search and find stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can
That's not what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He's,
But I love, like, sometimes I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I've got some apps for them on my iPod, and I wish, but I don't want to have their screen, I'm using things in the first several screens, so I got to flip to theirs, and then they, end up hitting, they'll hit the button twice, and then they can't find what they're
There's no question that folders are needed.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to have separate logins, which I think would be a pain at some point.
That'd be interesting if you could, with the iPad login, if different accounts, user accounts, I think that'd be useful because you might share this device with multiple people in the family room or something.
Well, you know why Apple won't do that? They want to have everybody have their own.
Well, actually, I think that they do that now. I think you could have separate accounts, separate iTunes accounts, and use the same device for everybody. It's just that there's a substantial time involved in switching over from one to the other because you got to reload everything.
Yeah.
So, depending on how rapidly you want to switch, that might or might not be feasible.
Do you have any more vertical markets you were thinking of, or have we hit the biggies?
I think I hit the biggies. Yeah, I think those are the kind of areas I was thinking of. And of course, games will be a big one too. I think games are going to be huge.
I was thinking about music education. You could have say you're a conductor and you need to push out parts to your whole ensemble. The click of a button, everyone has an iPad stand. It's a stand design, so you can just pop it in an iPad. You can push out music to the whole ensemble, and everyone has it. It moves for you as whatever.
Flip pages.
Right, it just moves as it can pick up through the mic where you're at even, or something like that. I mean, that could be interesting.
Kind of small.
That could be true for any performing arts.
Any of them.
Because the new app, David H. Lawrence, the guy who plays the puppet master on Heroes, he's a big time tech head and blogger, and he's been it for years. One of the little bit of trivia, he was one. I think at one point he was the voice of the "You've Got Mail." I'm not sure about that, but anyway, he's got an app now called Rehearsal, and it's the same kind of thing for delivering lines to actors, and it'll actually, you can highlight stuff, your parts on the page, and you can record things, and you can actually submit your audition to people and stuff. So any kind of performing art like that would be you could probably
and of course artists. I think that'll be kind of huge.
So who has actually played around with the SDK?
I just wanted to add some final closing thoughts to the discussion we had with the indie dev team. And the first thought I had is we had an iPad on hand, not an actual iPad. I wish we did. That'd be so much fun to play around with it early. But we did have a cardboard, a mock up iPad on hand. So this was actually the first time I had the opportunity to kind of play around with what are the dimensions like? What is this iPad feel like in your hand? As it wasn't the weight or anything, but what's it feel like to interact with the screen at the size that it is? And the most interesting thing that I found with all this is for those with small hands, the iPad may interact differently for you because for me, my hands were perfectly fit, so I could pinch the whole uh, diagonal of the screen. So I could actually pinch throughout the whole screen and I could interact with the entire screen with just 2 fingers. And for some people, this won't be the case, but for me, it was. So it is interesting to note that developers may have to look at who's going to be using this device, who's going to be interacting with it. Because if kids are interacting with it, you're going to have a way different way of writing apps. And you have to keep that in mind because the developer might have bigger hands than the end user. So I thought that was kind of interesting that some users will get the full ability to pinch the whole way, and some users won't. So I thought that was very intriguing. And I'm just very intrigued by all these vertical markets that we discussed and many more. And one thing to note is after this was recorded, we did find out that iBooks will let you sync and a bunch of other information that we did not have access to at the time, as we discussed on episode 9, the EPUB Possibilities show. And if you would like to support this show, you can do that in one of many ways. The first is simply subscribe in iTunes. The second is simply leave a review in iTunes. I really appreciate those. I love to hear what you like about the show and don't like about the show. And if there's anything I can do to improve the show or any comments or feedback you'd like to leave directly to me, you can send those to iPadPossibilities@gmail.com and send in your voice messages as well. I really appreciate those and they're really helpful, and we can even play some of those back in the show for extra content for you guys to listen to what you guys all think about the iPad and the possibilities of it. So you can leave those messages at 209-542-iPad. That's 209-542-4723 for those without the alphabetical keyboard in your phone. So those are the ways you can support the show. Financially, if you want to support the show, you can do that by donating to the show at thepossibilitiesnetwork.com. And you can also support the show by buying the podcast app. It's found in the App Store for $2.99. It's called the iPad Possibilities Podcast app. And you get the shows 24 hours in advance. And it's another great way to support the show. And if you would like to find out more information about this show, you can visit us at our website. It's found on thepossibilitiesnetwork.com. And you can find out more information about this show and other shows. We have a whole network of different shows based on possibilities and potential. So until Sunday night, this is the iPad Possibilities Podcast with Tim Chatton. We will speak again.